Hey everybody, today I'm going to talk about how to display biomedical models for on Sketchfab or really any platform, but I'm specifically going to show you kind of how to prep your models and things that you can do before you upload your models to Sketchfab or once you get your models into Sketchfab as well. So why biomedical models and what does that refer to? So biomedical models would be anything that comes from biomedical imaging like CT scans, MRI, cone beams, microCT, and this can be, human or veterinary. And why those types of models? Mostly because you don't have the actual color of the bones or the organs or whatever it is that's been imaged in that type of imaging. So you've got to apply color if you want to visualize your models to, you can make them pretty within your CT software, whatever software you're using to view your imaging data. But then once you get those models out and you want to display them somewhere like Sketchfab, then you need to add color. So I'm going to go through how to do that. I'm going to show you a few different things that you can do once you get your models exported out of your CT software. Specifically, I'm going to go through some tools in Meshlab, and then I'll show you some tools in Blender, and how you can also just bypass all of that if you want and just use the Sketchfab editor to make your models pretty. So the first thing, I have some vertebra here that I've exported as PLY models. I like the PLY because it's compact for a mesh. So I'm just going to grab some of these and bring them in here. Just drag and drop into Meshlab, and you can see that there's no color on these models. I just exported these from 3D Slicer, and they are individual models. So the default color that Meshlab displays them with is just this light gray, and which is fine, and you might like this color as is. And let's see, so down here you've got some of the visualization tools. So if you'll notice up here in the layer dialog next to all the model names, we have this solid cylinder selected, so that means that everything's being viewed as a solid mesh. So if we want to change anything about how it's being visualized, we can change it up here. But if you want to switch to wireframe view or turn on wireframe view or point cloud view, which we don't want any of that, we just want to make changes to this solid mesh view. So we need to click on the solid cylinder here to get access to those settings. So here we can do vertebra shading, vertex shading, or face shading, or none, and you can see how that changes the model. The vertex shading is a little bit smoother, but whatever. Down here under color, you can see mesh color, which is a little darker gray, user defined. If we click on this little gray square, double click it, then you get this little color palette. And the cool thing is that if you had chosen specific colors in your CT software to visualize your models, then you can either, write down those HTML color values, or you can, the palette's going to be the same. So if you just used some of these colors that are already in here, then you can use that. Then you can just click on them. Now, the thing is that this setting changes it in the viewer, but it doesn't actually apply the color to your model. So if you were to export this model, it's still just going to be gray. But what I like to do is I like to use this palette to find a color that I like. And you'll see that I have a custom color saved here, which is just a beige color. And the HTML code is FFF79. And for Meshlab, what we really need is we need the RGB color values. And so in order to actually change the color of this model for export, we need these RGB values. So it's red 255, green 247, and blue 217. So I'm going to go ahead and select that and apply it. It's just a nice beige color that I like. So now to actually apply this color to your model so you can export it, I'm going to go Filters, Color Creation and Processing, and Per Vertex Color Function. And here, all we do is enter the values. So the values for our beige color, if you want to see it again, you can double click that little beige square and see it. Okay, it doesn't want me to have those open at the same time, so I've used this a bunch, so I remember the colors. Red 255, green 247, and blue 217. You can also set an alpha value for transparency, but we just want it solid. And then I'll click Apply, Close. And then you'll notice this little star here in the layer dialog. That means that we changed something about our model, but we haven't saved it yet. So we're going to save it now. Export mesh as. So I'm going to save it in the same folder here, and I'm just going to add beige onto the end. And I'm just saving it as a PLY. Again, nice compact file. You can add color to it. It's just per vertex color, so the PLY is perfect. And you want to make sure you have vertex color checked. Let's also check the normal box, and yes, we want it to be binary. And click OK. Just give that a second. So this is cool if you want to, let's say you want L4 to be a totally different color, then you can go in and, change that to, this aqua blue color or something if you want. If you want all of them to be the same color, and also specifically for Sketchfab, if you have PLYs, if you have separate PLY models, you can't just drop them in all together. And so a cool thing that Meshlab has is a filter called Flatten Visible Layers. And I just want them all to be the same color. And so what I'm going to do is just combine all of these into one. So I'm going to right click in the layer dialog on any one of these, and I'm going to choose Flatten Visible Layers. And all of this is fine. We don't want to keep unreferenced vertices. Okay, and you'll see from the merged mesh, because I had saved this L5 with the beige color, it shows up as beige, and the others don't have any color yet, so they're just white. But we can go ahead now and do filters, color creation, processing, per vertex color function, and just apply that color that we wanted to all of them at the same time. And then now we can save that file, export mesh as, and I'm just going to call it, lumbar beige. So now this combined mesh is ready to go into Sketchfab if you want it this way. If you don't like Meshlab, or if you don't have it, or if you just want to, learn to use Blender, then we can do that as well. So let's go File, Import, PLY, and my folder is here on my desktop. And I'm just going to import those. I'm going to go ahead and import those 5 separate vertebrae that don't have color assigned to them yet. So I'm just using click and then shift select all of them. So I brought them in, clicked 1 to view from the front so I can kind of see where these are set. And I'm just going to, using left mouse to select them all, and I'll just move them up here just so they're kind of in the middle. And I want to keep them together for export purposes. So if you look up here in the top right, you can see we're in just solid view. And if we click the button right next to it to go to material view, the bones actually just show up white. There's no color applied to them. So to apply some sort of color, we're going to apply a material down here, material properties. So I'm just going to select the first one and say new material. And I mean, for biomedical models, I mean, you really don't have to worry about like creating a texture or applying a texture, because that's part of the advantage of these models, is having that solid color that just allows you to see features. So really all you need is a solid color, and you know, you can play around with like the roughness or the glossiness, and all of that you can also just do within the Sketchfab viewer. So to basically replicate what we did in Meshlab, but a little easier. So we have this material here, and if you see this base color, it's just white. So let's click on that. And I'm going to select hex, because I know the hex value of that beige color. It was FFF7D9. And I'll just hit enter. And now you see we have that beige color. And if you want to, you can double click on the material name and you can just call it beige or something if you want. And the nifty thing is when you select the next bone, you can just select this little material drop down and apply beige. And we can do that for each of our vertebra. So they just all have the same material. So now we can export these just as they are. They have some kind of color applied to them. So I'm going to use my left mouse button and just draw, well, I don't need the camera or the light, so I'm just going to delete those. And I'm going to say File, Export, and I'm going to do this a few ways. So one thing you can do is an FBX. Another thing we can do is OBJ. So let's do that in our little verts folder here. Blender OBJ. Selected only. Export. So now we're ready to get something uploaded to Sketchfab. And so I'll just start with this combined PLY that I did in Meshlab, where each vertebra was the same color. And we'll just drop that in. Okay, so now our model's ready. Going to click Edit 3D Settings. Okay, so let's get this looking a little bit prettier. So the first thing that I like to do is change the field of view and just drag that little slider all the way down. So this is basically an orthographic view. And the nice thing about Sketchfab is the coordinate system is Z up. So that is perfect for biomedical models, because that is the orientation. So your models that come out of your CT scans or MRIs or whatever in anatomical orientation will come into Sketchfab in the correct orientation. Now you can always tweak some things. I turned on this show advanced rotation button here, so it shows you the little grid, and the front is right here with the red line going off to the right. And you can, if you need to do some rotating of your model, you can use either these little XYZ arrow buttons in the editing dialog here, or you can hover over the little circles. There's red, green, and blue, and they'll turn, when they turn yellow, then that means you can kind of grab it and rotate. If you did something, you know, that you didn't like, you can hit this little reset orientation button under straighten model over here to the left. And to me, this looks fine. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is. A few things down here in the editor on the left, if we open up the boxes, you can see the vertex color is on. And we applied vertex color to our model, so the viewer is automatically detecting that. If we turn it off, then you see they're just plain white. You can open up the background color here. You can see what the default color is. For now, I'm just going to leave that. If we click on the third editing tab for materials, then you'll see that we don't have, because we just applied vertex color, we don't have an actual material like we did in Blender. But that's okay, because we can still fiddle with all these little settings under here to adjust how our model looks. So you can play around with roughness or, glossiness. And, right now it's super bright, so it's hard to even see what's happening there. So we'll click on the second editing tab, the lighting here, and see what your environment is set on. So mine is set on the industrial room. And if you like this, then you can just play around with the light intensity or the brightness. And I don't like that. I kind of like, if you click on the drop down here where it says industrial room, then you can change the environments. I kind of like this Trinitatis church. It's super bright. So the light intensity, I'm going to bring that down from 4 to like a 1. And that looks a lot nicer for our model. I'm going to go back to this material tab now. And one of the things that looks cool for bones, and you can try it with for other organs as well, is this subsurface scattering. So I'm going to open up the box here, and I'm going to toggle it on. And there's going to be some default values that are selected here. And I'm going to change those a little bit. I'm also going to go back and change the direction of our light. The subsurface scattering is not really visible unless the light is coming from a certain direction. And so I'm going to change this, the light orientation to 270, which is coming from the back. And now you can see what the subsurface scattering is doing. So let's go back to the material tab. So it's kind of just adding a little bit of a translucency to your models. And, bones are not totally translucent, but when the light's coming through really thin areas, there is a little bit. And it just kind of adds just a little interesting color to your models. And so you can just play around with that, and you can, rotate your model around, and then you can go up and adjust the glossiness, roughness, or glossiness if you want your bones to be shiny or not so shiny. The light is still a little bright here, so I think I'm going to go turn this back down a little more. The brightness, I'm going to bring that down to 0.5. I might bring the light intensity down just a little bit too. And then you can see if you want, if you want your models to be shiny or less shiny. It looks kind of nice there. You can, you can play around with some of these other functions, but I don't really, if you have opacity, if you had added an alpha value to your per vertex color, like in Meshlab, then you could play around with that. But, for this, I just want it to be solid. One thing that you can do is play around with sharpness, which is not really needed for models that are solid colors, but, again, it's just something you've got to look at, toggle it, see whether or not you like it. Another thing that might be useful here is this SSAO, the ambient occlusion. If we turn that on, you can see there's just the tiniest little bit of shading added to kind of these deeper parts of the model. So again, that's sort of personal preference, but the big thing is just changing like the lighting and changing the you know, the shininess and glossiness, so it's just not so it looks a little more solid and not so washed out. I think I'm actually going to change the front. I'm going to, rather than having anterior to the front, I think I'm going to rotate a little bit so we get a lateral view of the spine, kind of like that. If we go under the lighting tab again, another thing we can do is turn on a ground shadow. And so we can turn on the baked AO. And you've got to give that a little time for it to render. If you make any changes to the setting, then you'll have to wait for it to regenerate. So if we sort of look down on our model here, you can see that there's now a shadow underneath it, sort of where the floor is. And you know, that's not a huge thing for these types of models. It's a little thing. So again, you just play around with it. Of course, if you change your background to just black, then you don't need that shadow. So that would kind of be the last thing to do, is changing the background. And there's, you know, you can select the environment, which for this, you know, Trinitatis church that I selected is sort of this very pale grayish lavender color, which actually looks kind of nice. Or you can upload an image, or, you know, you can use one of the Sketchfab backgrounds as well, or just select a color. You can play around clicking with different colors, or you can just type in the hex value. I'll just type in black here, which looks nice too for some models. I'm just going to change this back. Oh, let's see, I'm going to change it to like a gray color. And once you have all of your material and lighting and background settings, everything set, then you can click this little button that says Save View, and that'll save that as your thumbnail view. There are other options here for to add annotations if you wanted to. You can just double click on your model and then add something. I'll say L1. We have no animation in this, so we don't have to worry about that. AR and VR, if you have this in your account, then you can rescale your model and adjust the person to a good scale. And save that. And then the main thing is just, you know, saving your settings and then publishing it when you're ready. So now let's take a look at the OBJ that we exported with the materials from Blender to see how that looks. So you need the OBJ and the material file, but we need to zip these together. So let's select both, and I'm just going to zip them. And then I'll drop the zip. Okay, this is ready. So let's go into Edit 3D Settings and see what this looks like. And so it basically looks the same, right? So we'll change our field of view again and show advanced rotation. I'm going to go ahead and get this rotated to the lateral view like I did with the other. You'll notice here there's no vertex color tab because we don't have vertex color, we have a material. So let's go see what that looks like. Under the material tab, you'll see it says beige. It has our material name and it shows the color that we assigned to it. If you click on the base color here, it shows FFF79. And so we can essentially do all the same things, you know, adjusting the glossiness if you want, turning on that subsurface scattering, and adjusting it down. Let's go change the lighting. Ooh. Made my subsurface scattering too thin, so I'm going to increase it a little bit. And you can play around with this texture setting too, and you know, just see how it changes. I like this profile 1 for bones, but you know, maybe you don't like it. Maybe you like profile 2 or 3, and you can always change these colors as well. But these are just the settings that I kind of like. And let's see, I'll go back and turn on that baked AO. For the shadow underneath, you can turn on the ambient occlusion as well, sharpness, whatever. It's all the same settings. So it kind of just comes down to preference then, if you want to do your vertex color in Meshlab, or if you want to just apply a material in Blender, and then just play around with all the same settings. That was just the simplest case where all the bones have the same color. So what if you want to change up the colors and have, you know, each one have a different color? Again, you can do that with the vertex color in Meshlab if you want, or you can, it's faster to do it here in Blender. So let's say I want to just change this. What if I want to make a new material? I want to remove this beige color and create a new material for L2. So maybe I'll just name it L2. Click on the color here, and you know, you can punch in a hex value, or you can just click on a color. It's that easy to just click on a color. I'm going to go click L1 and rename beige to L1. And let's see, I can make 3. Let's click the minus here to remove that material. I want to apply a new material. Call it L3. Make that like a bright orange. There we go. And L4. Ooh, that's bright. Go slightly less bright. Kind of a pink color. And L5 could be, let's pick a green. Okay. Same thing, I'm going to select all of these. I'm going to say export. So I did the same thing that I did with the other lumbars. I just put them in a zip, put the OBJ here, lumbar colors with the material. I'm going to drop that in. Let's edit 3D settings. Ta-da! We've got our different colors in here. Change field of view. I'm going to make it so that the lateral is forward again. Now for this, because we have a bunch of different colors, Well, first, the first thing is you can see under materials, if we click the little drop down here, that all the material names that we created are here. L1, if I click on L1, you see that L1 gets highlighted in yellow, so you know that the correct bone was selected. So if you want to make any changes down here, then make sure you have the correct one selected, and you can, yeah, so just if we want that to be glossy or not. Because we have all these different colors now, the subsurface scattering doesn't really matter. So it's more about just kind of setting the glossiness or roughness if you want. So I'm gonna I don't remember what I said on L1. Oh, okay. Now the lighting still looks kind of bad on this, so I'm going to go and change the lighting. You can either just reduce the brightness, which looks okay. We can also change the orientation. I'm going to go ahead and pick that Trinitatis Church again and see how that looks. Ooh. Bring that light intensity down. I kind of like this one better. Just change that orientation so it's more towards the front, kind of at an angle. I'll go ahead and turn on these ground shadows again. Or maybe you just want to have a black background. That always looks nice when you have models like this with a bunch of bright colors. You just kind of pick the orientation you want to be your thumbnail and save that. So I'll just open this up real quick here. If sometimes you might have like soft tissue overlaid with bone, or maybe you've got, you know, bones that overlap and you want to make one of them transparent, then you can open this opacity tab, turn it on, and kind of play around with the opacity. In this case, let's see, that one says blending, which doesn't look very good. We can try the refraction, additive, and dithered. You know, this isn't a great example because I don't have anything that's like, you know, I don't have any soft tissue outside of this, but or really not super overlapping structures, but it's there if you want it. So for this, with the multicolors, you can export an OBJ or you can export an FBX as well from Blender, and basically just have access to all the same functions. Again, you don't have to get fancy with it. You know, you can just pick a color and and then use all of these cool tools that are in the Sketchfab viewer to make your models look better. And actually, if you don't, you know, once you get the colors in here, if you don't like them, or if you just don't want to go through the process of using Meshlab or Blender to apply a color, then you really don't have to. You can change the color in the viewer here. So let me select L1 since that one was just beige. If you click on this base color, and you get a whole color palette here, so I can just change it if I wanted to, you know, to a totally different color. What if I want to go with a bright blue? Boom, it's done. So you can just upload your plain gray, plain white models, and then just adjust the colors within the editor. So that's about it. I've shown you just some simple tools, very minimal tools to make your biomedical models look a little nicer in Sketchfab. And basically anywhere if you wanted to export and display them anywhere. And if you're worried about presenting models using the viewer, that's different from what they actually are. Like if you just upload a model with no color and just use the editor to add the color and all of these other features. Just remember that Sketchfab has a model inspector. If we go down here to the bottom right, it's this thing that looks like a stack of papers. And so, any of those things that you've turned on, anybody who's looking at your models can go through and turn off the post-processing, or they can view, base color, metalness, roughness, scattering, translucency. So all this stuff, or just the matte cap finish, which is just kind of gives you a metallic silver look so you can see the structure really well. And even wireframe and normals. So all of these tools are there, unless, the only way they would not be there is if you were publishing your models privately and then embedding them on an external website and you choose to not make those inspection tools available to your, viewers. But otherwise, it's, you're not hiding anything. You're just making them look a little prettier and making them look a little more clickable and possibly even more informative. Because if your models are totally washed out, then you might not be able to see what it is you're trying to convey in your model. And even the lighting is adjustable. If you hold the Alt button, remember how we set the lighting direction to be coming from behind so you could see the subsurface scattering? If you hold Alt and then just drag your mouse, then you can move that lighting around and you can see how the subsurface scattering changes with the light. So there's a lot of cool features to just help you display your models well. So that's it. Have fun with Meshlab or Blender, whatever you choose to use to modify your models or not. Just upload them and use the tools in the editor to set the orientation and color and all of that. You can take a look at my collection called microCT models and just take a look at some of the different ways that I've displayed them. And let me know if you have any questions.